Welcome back to Talking with Famous People. I'm your host, Zachary. We got your host, Tony. We have our famous person, David, and he is enjoying an alcoholic beverage right now. Is that
There's very low levels of alcohol. You gotta drink a lot of kombucha to become drunk on this thing. But fermented beverage, I guess that's probably the best way to put it.
right on?
We now
So
know that David is a INTP. Um, yeah, and I just gotta say over and over again, man, I love INTPs for many reasons. But
David
that
still doesn't
aside,
know my type.
Oh
yeah.
no.
Um, to,
Um,
to speed things up, though, I'm an INTP as well. Because
Okay.
I want to get things. I want to start. I want to see how you and Tony know each other. I want to get into that. Forgot that.
All right.
We don't even get to talk about that.
yeah,
So, how do you guys know each other?
Wanna go ahead, Tony, or do you want me to
yeah,
start?
I'll do it just because I like beginnings of how I've started relationships with people. Um, I could use my SI in that sense because I like meeting new people. It's like I have an encyclopedia of new people. Now, David. Now, I first saw David in sort of a, let's say, self-development Facebook group. So I joined that Facebook group and I saw a video of him posting a video of himself in the middle of a mall, lying down on the ground. So I click on the video and it's just like what I explained. It's himself lying down on the mall, on the ground, and it turns out it was sort of a he was practicing getting over certain social fears, right? I guess in this case being comfortable just doing odd things, such as laying down on the ground in public, right? So I thought that was super cool because it's like you're facing your fears to better yourself. So what I'd like to do is I like to look at cool people and see what kind of cool stuff they post on their Facebook. And David had a lot of things that he posted that resonated with me a lot. Things such as effective thinking, strategizing, psychology, self-development. He was and David's more trained also in movement, right? I think he studied kinesiology at the University of Waterloo, and he still to this day practices daily. Practice in movement, right?
Been stuck at
Now,
home for a week. No movement.
yeah, recently he's been sick, but anyhow, let me try to continue here. So I added him on Facebook. I was just like, hey, I like your shit. I'm gonna add you on Facebook so I can follow your shit. And he was like, okay. And then I saw him post a status saying, wow, I went to an intuitive meetup. So he went to a meetup where he interacted with, INTP, sorry, intuitive dominance. So, ENTPs, ENFPs, INFJs, INTJs, etc. Right? And he was an INTP, and then he said it was very freaky. And I was like, oh wow, meetups. That's a cool idea. So you go on Meetup.com, you find out what kind of interests you're into, and other people are into, whether it be meditation or eating paleo, or psychology or philosophy or playing chess or practicing amateur jiu-jitsu, whatever you're into, you could meet other like-minded people. So I went to the next meeting, and that's where I met David. And then, we started talking about things like integral theory, like behavior change, about anything and everything,
No, can you define
basically.
integral theory?
Oh, that's a very David, would you like to?
Yeah, I'll take it off from here.
Yeah.
So integral theory is basically this school of philosophy, I guess. It's more of a meta theory, so it comprises of many smaller theories. But this idea that no one particular viewpoint is 100% true or 100% wrong, but they all have value in some way. Not all equal, but in um, sometimes in a hierarchy. So there's different viewpoints, and they all add up to the bigger picture. I guess that's a very simple way of putting it. But I'll use different theories, different works of different developmental psychologists, like Abraham Maslow, developmental psychologists, Lawrence Kohlberg. But basically, it finds a pattern in all of these developmental psychologists, and sorry, and it lays out that pattern of human development. So no matter what field that you look into of human development, of how a human can grow, it goes through the same developmental pattern of going from a very egocentric or identifying with just yourself to an ethnocentric stage or worldview where you identify with a group, to a world-centric worldview or identification of identifying with the whole of Earth, of the world, and then cosmocentric. So that's just one part of integral theory. But to sum it up, it's another way of calling integral theory is AQAL theory, AQAL. So there's 5 parts to integral theory. There's the quadrants, there's the levels, there's the lanes, there's the types, and there's the states. So it looks into all of these categories of ways of looking at reality. I think that's the best way of putting it. It splits reality into 5 main categories, and it takes a comprehensive view looking at all the theories and seeing exactly what's going on and find the pattern of what actually makes it work. So we can get deeper into it a little bit, maybe if you guys want. But that
I want to touch on the egocentric thing. I find it interesting that children in their development, they first develop that egocentric identity where it's like, if you at a certain age they stand in front of the TV screen, for example, in front of you. So you're watching TV, they come in front of you, and they look at the TV, and you tell them to move, and they don't understand it because they think that everyone else sees the same way they do. And it's not necessarily egoistic, but it is egocentric in the sense that their perception of the world is filtered completely through their own identity. Now, I find it very interesting how when they start developing empathy for other people, they develop a type of animism, as Jean Piaget called it, where they will apply psychological attributes and human attributes to inanimate objects and develop feelings and kind of transfer thoughts to those inanimate objects, how children talk to their teddy bears and whatnot. So it's interesting that it's almost as if in developing empathy for other individuals that it's so pure that it reaches to all of everything that they identify as extension of the self. So it all kind of it connects, like it just seems like this pure compassion for everything, and then as you once that's developed, then their cultural norms, and they look to their environment to refine their empathy and come to their moral absolutes. So that's kind of where the whole, I think, where like you said, the part of integral philosophy that suggests that we can't come to 100% truth about things, or it's almost like a gradient of truth. I think that especially applies to morality, because we know that at the least it's descriptively relative, right? We know that morality is descriptively relative because we can see it. Different cultures value different things, and it's interesting how I think it's still a struggle in philosophy, and I think it's a go of psychology as well, is coming to these. How do we define our moral absolutes? Morality and compassion for other people, and how it's difficult, very difficult to study a field like that because there is no. You have to operate through the individuals, and by doing that, it is almost inherently unempirical, so to speak, because it's so it becomes so subjective to a point.
Okay.
Now, David, how do you think integral theory kind of takes that into account?
So first I gotta ask, what do you mean by it describes it through the individuals? You mean purely subjectively? Purely through what they believe is right?
We when it comes to studying morality and ethics,
Mm,
it's almost an abstract concept in the sense that it is it brings about real changes in our societies and in our dynamics between relationships. But we can't, in, at least at the current point in our knowledge, we can't observe like, oh, there's a law that tells us that murder or lying is wrong. You know what I mean? It's defined through our relationships within a society. So
mm,
it kind of it's a an issue that I've been kind of wrestling around for a while in my head of kind of the is it possible for there to be multiple moral truths? Since
mm.
different cultures come to different, relative truths, at least descriptively
Mm.
relative.
Yeah.
So that's what
So
I kind
you're
of mean by
on.
like the yeah.
Yeah, you're onto something there in terms of different levels of morality, different levels of truth. I mean, that's pretty much how the integral school of thought lays it out. If you heard of, I think I mentioned before, Lawrence Kohlberg. Have you heard of that psychologist?
I've not.
Okay, so he's actually uh, his work is on the psychology of morality, and again, like Piaget. So just to backtrack, Piaget had that same pattern of going from what he called pre-operational, I believe. Yeah, pre-operational to formal operational to almost like a post-operational. So I probably don't have the exact terminology right, but I'm pretty close. Basically, the infant starts at a very at a stage where he's completely fused with the environment. He can't tell where he starts and where the environment starts. It's just all one thing. And then later
Sees the world as an
the infant,
extension of themselves. Yeah.
yeah, in a fused state. Now a lot of people get that confused because they think it's like, okay, you that's where we start off with this very almost heavenly state, and then we lose that, and then it's our job to get that back. They confuse that because uh, the state that a baby is in, that fused state, is not the same state that an enlightened sage would be. Even though they identify or they have the symptoms of that of being one with everything, right? But it's completely different. This is what the integral theory calls the pre-trans fallacy of being pre-conventional or pre-operational is not the same as being post-operational or post-conventional. They're someone who's advanced to that great level, that vertical development of a sage or a advanced mystic. He's had to go through transcending an ego, whereas a baby hasn't even developed an ego yet. He hasn't even transcended that, so it's a completely different
So yeah, he
thing.
sees himself as
Yeah.
almost assimilated into his environment.
Yeah, it's only about I don't. So I could be butchering this again, but maybe either 9 weeks or 9 months, nine something, that the baby learns that uh, is able to develop an ego, a sense of self himself, to
And they start
differentiate
seeing
him from
themselves, yeah, from he's able to,
the mother, yeah, the
yeah,
mother in the environment.
yeah, they start seeing themselves through as separate entities from their surroundings. And what's
Yeah.
interesting is that once the egocentric self gets almost I don't think it completely dissolutes as we develop into our older stages of life. I think it kind of gets repressed a bit, but we still have that egocentric self because doing performing altruistic behavior, pro-social behavior, there's still an egocentric part of that there. That's it makes you feel good, and you see the people who are close to you. There are things in them that you see as extensions of yourself and aspects of yourself that you identify with yourself. So if you look at it that way, perhaps having that enlightened sage wisdom, so to speak, and having your
Mhm.
compassion extend to everything around you is almost a projection of the egocentric self into your environment, and where you identify everything as yourself. and that's the kind of like dissolution of the ego is in philosophies such as like Buddhism and the like. And it's definitely an interesting struggle to rid this off of the ego, so to speak, of the self identity. But at the same time, you have to learn to not. You both have to grow compassion for everything, uh, the beings around you. But another part of Buddha's philosophy and Eastern philosophies are learning to not attach yourself to too much to the material world because it doesn't bring any long-term fulfillment, right? So you almost have to reject certain aspects of the world, but re-enter it through a higher enlightened perspective, and so you can feel compassion without feeling deeply connected to the parts of your life that may be material, such as like your your bank account or your car or your house or etc.
Yeah, you touched on something very important there. This idea of destroying the ego. I think that's it. So it's not really so much a destroying of the ego, but like I said before, it's a transcending of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go through the stages of development, it's not like, okay, we go from stage 1 to stage 2, and all of a sudden stage 1 is gone. But it's a transcend and include. It's not just going on to the next stage and forgetting about stage 1. It's, if you imagine like a ladder, or the best description is like one of those Russian dolls that engulf each other and keep on going up. So each stage that you go up includes the one before. You maintain all the qualities, the capabilities and qualities of the one before, but you go beyond it to the next level, and you look from that viewpoint instead of from the egocentric. So when you go from egocentric to ethnocentric, it's a transcend and include. You still have all those egoic tendencies and qualities, but you expand what you identify with yourself. So just the nature of that description, it's not, okay, what you identify as you goes beyond just merely yourself. It includes yourself, but it envelops much more than simply just yourself. You identify with your whole group, or then to the world, and then to the cosmos, right?
So,
Yeah.
so do you think that should be the goal of oh, there's some echo now. Can you guys hear that? Wait.
It's gone now.
Okay, it's gone now. Yeah. Okay. Do you think that the goal of a society should be to further that in then to reach for the individuals under the society to reach that enlightened self, so to speak, where they identify with the group, with everything around them, and kind of express that compassion for everything? Should that be the goal of the individual?
Should that be the goal of the individual? Of course. Growth is a natural principle of life. As long as you're on Earth, you're growing in a direction, and this is just the pattern of how a human individual grows in all areas. So one could be spiritual intelligence, but particularly interest in this conversation is that moral intelligence, right? So again, just to tie it back, we have the work of Lawrence Kohlberg, who looked at different moral worldviews. So he actually did an experiment, I believe, where he asked a group of college students, I believe, or a group of people, and he presented them with this hypothetical situation of, okay, your wife is sick, and there's this guy selling this medicine, but it's too expensive for you to buy. So what do you do then? Do you go and steal it from the wife? Do you go and steal it from the guy who's selling it because he can't afford it? Should the guy selling it go to jail because he's not being fair, not being moral? So
Or should
obviously,
you let your wife die, or etc.
Yeah, exactly. Or do you let your wife die? So obviously, there's a whole bunch of different answers, and I'm not going to say which one's right, but there's a whole bunch of different answers that that go into these similar groups of patterns. And according to those groups, he found that different percentages were allocated to those different groups, and they fit a certain moral worldview. Again, from pre-conventional of identifying with just very self-centered needs to an ethnocentric or that's still pre-conventional in a way.
Yeah, Sam Harris calls it actually a moral landscape, right?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, Sam
yeah,
Harris. Yeah, I've
exactly.
yeah he's a Sam Harris has some really interesting material out there. He's a I love watching I found his kind of speech on free will and the kind of the I guess he's a pretty strong determinist, you know, and it's
Mhm.
very interesting to hear his arguments as to why he thinks that's the most efficient way to, or I guess the best way to describe certain behavior. Uh,
Yeah.
but you know, so does it follow if it's the individual's kind of growth to develop those ethnocentric views? Should
Mhm.
the goal of a political system be to have an environment fertile to reaching that goal?
Yes, of course.
Does
For
that
me, it seemed.
okay?
Yeah.
Go
Go
on.
ahead.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Uh, to have a government foster an environment for allowing people to grow, I would say yes. I couldn't really see any reason otherwise.
So, okay, there's like multiple ways I could take this, but I'm unsure of where to go, because I still haven't decided on. I agree with you though. I agree with you that a goal of a political system should be to further the growth of the individuals in the system. Um,
Mhm.
but I'm still unsure of what. I guess that begs the question: what political system is best for achieving that goal? You know. And I guess that would be getting into the realm of political theory and political ideologies that best achieve human potential. But yeah, that's another topic for another time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've got to have a political system that values that growth, first of all,
Individual,
right?
it would value individual autonomy, so
Uh,
to kind of self-govern themselves to reaching that. So there'd have to be
yeah.
individual rights, right?
Yeah. So I think to make it kind of clear of in terms of morals where integral theory stands on it, or even in terms of what Lawrence Kohlberg's work, um, how they see morals and ethics, it's basically you're trying to do. So there's a lot of different kinds of moral theories, that kind of stuff. There's uh, Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative.
Mm.
Okay, like anything you're trying to do, it's gonna be consider it like the law that everyone does, right? And if it makes sense that way, then it makes sense. Should everyone try to
If everyone lied,
uh,
then everyone would be
yeah,
deluded, and yeah, yep,
exactly,
categorical
exactly. So
imperative.
integral theory, how they approach morals is they say the right thing to do is what's best for the greatest greatest depth for the greatest breadth. I think that's it. So it considers depth as in terms of the the level of development of the individual, or
And then the
or even
greatest breadth would be uh, the individual, how it relates to the society as a whole.
and uh, that's more of like the quantity of the the organism or the individual. So, and it depends on context as well. So, okay, let's say if you have like an Albert Einstein who's very highly developed, right? And this is where it gets kind of tricky too. You have an Albert Einstein who's very developed, and then versus uh,
Tony.
uh, just three regular people, right? Like three of us. Like, would it make sense to sacrifice our lives for his life? Again, it depends on the context as well. If it's some world issue where his physics knowledge would,
Well, didn't we just lay down that that a person's the individual rights have to be respected for it to allow that growth? So then persons would have rights over their own body then the answer to what you just proposed would be no. Because we all have rights to our bodies. We all have our right to autonomy and whatnot. So the state wouldn't have the moral imperative to sacrifice us for an Einstein. So, you know, but that kind of
Yeah.
touches on like utilitarianism, and the arguments of how, the end result. I guess the greater good of just like, if the end result is better for everyone, is it the best course of action?
Okay.
And
Right, and I think David did mention that this is where it gets complex.
yeah,
I suppose the government, wouldn't have the imperative to, interfere with those rights, But I mean, man, just thinking about Albert Einstein, I'm compelled to say, even though my actions might speak differently, I'm compelled to say, if Albert Einstein and a bunch of smart people approached me and really did persuade me to the truth, to the most truthful extent of how, let's say a wild scenario where someone needs to die for Albert Einstein to, exist, or to contribute his work, I'm compelled to, consider at least the chance that I might sacrifice myself for Albert Einstein.
yeah.
Given,
Then,
yeah.
do you think that so? Does that ask the question: are individual rights important? Are they needed? Is it possible to have the individual growth in relation to the whole of a society and still have an ethical system such as utilitarianism, where we have an authoritative state that if Albert Einstein, or if our great thinker needs needs this medicine, or needs like you'd have to sacrifice 3 drug addicts, for example, or alcoholics to save a popular and progressive like academic or something. Then
Yeah.
how do you decide that? Would it be better to have a system like that to kind of come
Mm.
in and just authoritatively decide that, okay, this person is more important than these individual worth, so let's get rid of that and just keep them, etc.
Mm. That's
I do
interesting.
believe that in the real life situation that we currently are in, it's not so much a complete sacrifice of one for the benefit of the other. I think it is more of a compromise, more so a complete sacrifice, right? So
Mm.
I think we are giving, I think we do put value in the depth of capitalism and further technological advances and education and research, because I think, I can't remember which school of thought argues for this, but as long as we're growing more knowledge and more technology and more wealth, then if that trend continues, then everything below that also rises, right? So it's I'm trying to remember which economist really had a good argument for that. But as long as let's say the top 10, 20% is growing and building technologies and building wealth and knowledge, then that is going to have a ripple effect for the rest of society. So I'm not saying that is exactly what what we're doing with when it comes to trying to achieve the greatest depth for the greatest breadth, but I think it's somewhere in that realm, if I'm not mistaken. Do you
Well,
think so, David?
define the greater breadth. Yeah, what's the greater breadth again?
Yeah, we hit depth. Let's go
Mm.
into breadth.
Breadth is just the quantity of that individual, or that that individual, or that organism that you're considering.
Okay, so
It's
So
how many
let's.
how many deer, right? Like, so there's and that's the thing. Like how so you have a human who is much deeper, so to say, than a deer. But then, like, how many deer would equal one human, right? And then
yeah,
again, you'd have to go beyond breadth and depth to consider the context and the situation that it's in too. Because if you need a human to save the world, then a deer can't. There's not even exactly, right. you can't, if you need a human to save the world, and then it doesn't matter how many deer you save because asteroids come into Earth, and even if you trade the human for the deer can't do anything. But if you have the human, you could save that the asteroid from coming down and destroying the Earth. So it's depth, it's breadth, and it's also the situation that you're in as well.
Yeah, I think it's just a way of thinking of it's a perspective that should be taken into consideration.
Yeah.
You know,
I
exactly.
Oh, go on.
It's
Yeah,
basically how I
I'm
see
always
it.
I'm always more for more information, more perspectives to
Yeah,
take into
exactly.
consideration. Yeah, so
That's the conclusion that Lawrence Kohlberg came to, right? The higher, the more depth